Sometimes you hear a ghost story, but what if the ghost was alive? Imagine a person just stepping out of the shadows of history. No past, no name, and a story so completely bizarre it feels like a dark fairy tale. And for 200 years, this very real story has haunted everyone. Investigators, scientists, even kings.
No, really, just stop and think about that for a second. What if someone just appeared? A teenager who walks like a toddler, who can barely speak, who acts like he was literally born yesterday. Well, this isn't fiction. This is the true, baffling story of a boy named Kaspar Hauser.
For him, sunlight wasn't warm, it was an attack. He'd recoil from it like it was physically hitting him.
The scent of flowers, something you or I would find lovely, was so overpowering to him that it literally made him pass out. He genuinely thought his little wooden horse was a living, breathing pet, and the glint of a sword sent him into pure, primal terror. It was like a terrifying, real-world experiment in what a human becomes without a world to grow up in. To him, our reality was just a chaotic, alien assault on the senses.
Okay, so let's set the scene. The year is 1828, in the city of Nuremberg, Germany. A young man, maybe 16, is found stumbling through a town square. He can barely walk. His feet are so tender they're bleeding on the cobblestones, and he can only say one phrase, over and over again. I want to be a cavalryman, as my father was.
And as he slowly learned to speak, he told a story that absolutely horrified Europe. He said he had spent his entire life, as long as he could remember, in a tiny pitch-black cell. He slept on straw, and his only friends were two little wooden horses. His food and water? They were just left for him by a faceless figure he called the Black Man, who only came when he was asleep. It was a life of total sensory deprivation, almost as if someone was trying to erase him from existence.
But what if this wasn't just some random act of cruelty? What if this was a calculated political move? This is where the story gets explosive. The biggest theory is that Kaspar Hauser wasn't just some poor kid. He was the secret, stolen Prince of Baden, hidden away to completely change the royal family tree.
And there was some pretty compelling evidence to back this up. So, the theory goes like this. The real prince was secretly swapped with the dying baby, which allowed a different branch of the family to take the throne. And now, all these years later, the true heir had suddenly reappeared. He even had powerful believers, like Germany's top criminologist. And as if to prove he was a threat, the moment his story got out, people started trying to kill him.
Now, what you got to understand about this quote is the man who said it. Anselm von Feuerbach was basically the Sherlock Holmes of his day. This wasn't some romantic getting swept up in a fairy tale. He was a giant in the legal world, and after he interviewed Kaspar, he was completely convinced the boy's story was true, calling his imprisonment a crime against the soul. Feuerbach was the one who started to build the secret case that Kaspar was royalty, a move that might have ended up costing him his life.
But for every piece of evidence that points to a lost prince, there's another that suggests something way, way more cynical. What if Kaspar Hauser wasn't a victim at all? What if he was the mastermind behind the greatest hoax of the 19th century?
And this, right here, is the absolute heart of the mystery. Were the attacks on his life actual assassination plots, or were they just self-inflicted wounds to get back in the headlines when people started to lose interest? Was his sensory overload real, or was it just a brilliant performance to make himself seem otherworldly? And his death? Was it a political hit, or something much, much sadder? Skeptics point to some major red flags. Medically, spending 16 years in a tiny cage should have left him with severe rickets and muscle decay. He didn't have that. His stories also had a habit of changing, getting a little more dramatic right when public interest started to fade. And maybe the biggest blow? His main supporter, a British nobleman named Lord Stanhope, suddenly dropped him, publicly calling him a liar and an imposter.
And you have to understand the kind of pressure this kid was under. In just 5 years, over 15,000 articles were written about him. He was one of the world's first truly global media sensations, basically the 19th century version of going viral. So whether he was a prince or a fraud, he was trapped by his own legend.
And that legend came to a very violent end. On a cold December day, Kaspar stumbles home, clutching a fatal stab wound in his chest. He claims a stranger attacked him in a snowy park. But when the police went to investigate, they found something absolutely chilling. The snow was perfectly untouched. There was only one set of footprints leading to and from the scene of the crime,
and they were Kaspar's.
Near the scene, police found a small bag, and inside was this super cryptic note written backwards in mirror writing. A taunt from the killer, right? But here's the twist. Mirror writing was a little trick that Kaspar himself was known to do, and the note was folded in a really peculiar triangular way, a style that, you guessed it, Kaspar himself was known to use. So you have to ask, was this a killer's calling card or just a prop for Kaspar's final tragic performance?
He lingered for 3 days. Everyone was waiting, hoping for a deathbed confession or maybe a final accusation. He gave them nothing. He stuck to his story right to the very end, dying with these enigmatic words, leaving the mystery perfectly and infuriatingly intact.
So for over a century and a half, the case just went cold. Was he a prince or a liar, murder or suicide? It was pure speculation. And then, in the late 20th century, we developed this incredible tool that could basically reach back in time and ask the dead for answers: DNA analysis.
For more than 160 years, it was all just a legend. But then, as you can see here, modern science finally got its shot. The first real attempt came in 1996 with a DNA test on a blood-stained shirt that was supposedly worn by Kaspar the day he died.
And the results were a bombshell. The DNA was not a match for the royal family of Baden. The legend was dead. The headline screamed that the mystery was finally solved. Kaspar Hauser was a fraud. Case closed.
Or was it? I mean, what if the sample was contaminated? After all that time, what if they tested the wrong piece of clothing entirely?
And this is just brilliant. In 2002, a different team ran new tests, but this time on authenticated samples of Kaspar's actual hair. The results? They could not rule out a family connection. Now, it wasn't a perfect one-to-one match, but it proved the first test was flawed. So science, instead of giving us a final answer, just blew the case wide open again and made the mystery even deeper than before.
So, after all that, we are left exactly where we started, with 2 possibilities, and both of them are equally incredible. Was he a stolen prince, the victim of a ruthless political conspiracy so powerful it could reach across time to silence him? Or was he a brilliant, pathological liar who built an identity so convincing that he literally chose to die for it? The boy who came from nowhere left us with a perfect 200-year-old riddle, and the answer is still out there, lost somewhere in the snow.